There is a prophecy written more than 400 years ago that, according to thousands of researchers and scholars, has already come true 3 different times. The first time, the world simply ignored it. The second time, some people began paying attention, but the third time happened recently, and according to some researchers, it may be happening again right now, at this very moment. Before continuing, I need to make an important disclaimer. This video brings together historical interpretations, theories, and analyses about the prophecies of Nostradamus. The goal is to explore these interpretations in an informative way, allowing you to draw your own conclusions. In the 16th century, a French physician, astrologer, and writer named Michel de Nostradamus, better known to the world as Nostradamus, wrote a work that would cross the centuries and continue to spark curiosity to this day. The book was called the Prophéties, Les Sonneries. In it, more than 900 quatrains are gathered, short 4-line poems, written in enigmatic language, full of metaphors, symbols, and possible interpretations. Ever since, historians, linguists, philosophers, and researchers have debated the same question. Do these texts really describe future events? Or are they simply vague enough that any major historical event can be fitted into them after the fact? That discussion remains alive to this day. And in this video, we're going to look at 3 events that, according to many scholars and admirers of Nostradamus, seem to bear a striking resemblance to some of his quatrains. In the end, the decision is entirely yours. Coincidence, or something far more intriguing? The first supposed prediction takes us to the year 1666. More than a century after Nostradamus' death, one of the greatest tragedies in English history occurred. The Great Fire of London. The fire began in a seemingly ordinary way, but within a few days it turned a large part of the city to ashes. More than 13,000 homes were destroyed, hundreds of streets disappeared, and thousands of people lost nearly everything they owned. After the tragedy, some scholars went back to the prophecies and found a passage that drew a lot of attention. One of the quatrains referenced the number 66 and described a great fire linked to events coming from the skies. For followers of Nostradamus, this resemblance was striking. For critics, it was just an interpretation made after the disaster had already happened. And that's exactly where one of the biggest debates surrounding the prophecies comes from. Do they really anticipate events, or is it we who go looking for connections when we look back at the past? Regardless of the answer, this was just the first piece of a much bigger puzzle, because the second supposed prediction is even more controversial. This time, Nostradamus wouldn't have just described an event, according to many researchers. He would have mentioned a name, and this is exactly where the story gets a lot more intriguing. The second time intrigues even people who don't believe in prophecies. In different quatrains, Nostradamus uses a word that would carry controversy across the centuries. Hyster. Decades later, the world would witness the rise of one of the most feared men in history, Adolf Hitler. The similarity between the names fueled countless interpretations. For many followers of Nostradamus, Hyster would be a direct reference to Hitler. For historians, on the other hand, the term actually referred to the ancient Latin name for a region near the Danube River. And it's precisely this disagreement that makes this story so fascinating. Each side presents solid arguments, but there's another detail that keeps drawing attention. Some of the quatrains describe devastating wars, large-scale destruction, shifting borders, and a leader capable of plunging the world into chaos. According to defenders of the prophecies, these descriptions fit remarkably well with the events of World War II. Millions of lives were lost, entire countries were left in ruins, and the planet was never the same again after that conflict. Could it just be coincidence? Or could a man from the 16th century really have written something that would make sense hundreds of years later? That question remains without a definitive answer, and maybe it always will. But there's a detail few people mention. The first 2 interpretations only gain strength when looked at together, because there is a third prophecy. And for many researchers, It's the most impressive of all, not because it happened hundreds of years ago, but because it happened right before our eyes. All of us lived through this moment. All of us felt its effects, and maybe some of its consequences are still unfolding right now. It was precisely this third interpretation that made even the most skeptical scholars go back and reread some pages of the prophecies, because for the first time the similarities seemed too close to ignore. And this is where the story reaches its most unsettling point. Next, we're going to talk about an interpretation that continues to divide opinions around the world. An interpretation that, for some, is the strongest evidence that Nostradamus really did anticipate historical events, while for others, it's just another example of the human mind's remarkable ability to find patterns where maybe none ever existed. And that is exactly the most unsettling part of this whole story. And now we arrive at the third interpretation, the closest to us, the most debated, and perhaps the most frightening for many people. According to some researchers and followers of Nostradamus, one of the passages in the prophecies could be related to a major event that completely changed the way the world lives. The interpretation speaks of a great evil coming from far away, something that would spread quickly among different nations, causing fear, isolation, and a profound change in society. For many admirers of the prophecies, this description would recall an event that marked humanity in recent years, the global pandemic. For the first time in decades, entire countries came to a stop. Cities emptied out. Millions of people completely changed their habits. The world found itself living with a reality that had seemed impossible just a few years earlier. Fear of an invisible threat, isolation within our own homes, distance between people who used to be close, and a transformation in the way we work, study, and relate to one another. For those who believe in Nostradamus' predictions, the similarities are hard to ignore, but there's another side to this story. Historians and experts point out that many of the phrases attributed to Nostradamus are extremely symbolic and open to different interpretations. That means that after a major event occurs, it's possible to find similarities in old texts and link them to the event. And that's exactly the central point of the debate. Did Nostradamus really manage to see future events? Or are we simply trying to find answers in words written hundreds of years ago? The truth is, there's no definitive proof capable of settling this discussion. But one thing is undeniable. Few writers in history have managed to remain so present in people's imagination as Nostradamus. Even after more than 4 centuries, his writings continue to spark curiosity, theories, and debates around the world. And maybe that's the greatest mystery of all. Not just what he wrote, but why so many people keep trying to uncover a hidden meaning in his words. Because in the end, the question might not simply be, did Nostradamus predict the future? Maybe the more interesting question is, why do we as human beings feel such a need to find patterns and answers in the face of the unknown? And that question brings us to the most important part of this story, the part that often gets forgotten when we talk about prophecies. Critical analysis. When we examine Nostradamus' prophecies, we need to look at every side of the story, not just the coincidences, but also the possibilities of interpretation. Many historians and skeptical researchers argue that Nostradamus' quatrains were deliberately written in a vague way, full of symbols, metaphors, and phrases that can carry different meanings, and that allows different generations to find possible connections to events of their own time. This phenomenon even has a name, confirmation bias. It's when our minds tend to pay more attention to information that confirms what we already believe, while brushing aside anything that contradicts our view. For example, when a major event happens, we might go back to an old text and find phrases that seem to fit that situation perfectly. But the question is, did that connection exist from the start, or was it created after we already knew the outcome? That's a question that continues to divide opinions. For some, the coincidences surrounding Nostradamus are too impressive to ignore. For others, they only show how capable the human mind is of finding patterns and meaning in complex events. Maybe we'll never have a definitive answer, Maybe the real mystery lies precisely in that uncertainty. After all, between prediction and coincidence, there's a vast space where human interpretation comes into play, and now I want to know your opinion. Do you believe Nostradamus really managed to predict future events? Or do you believe this is all just a combination of interpretations made after the fact? Leave your opinion in the comments. Write prophecy if this topic sparked your curiosity. And if you enjoy stories about mysteries, unexplained events, and facts that challenge our understanding, subscribe to the channel. Because in the next video, we're going to investigate another prophecy that caught the attention of millions of people around the world. And the strangest detail about it is that many believe it hasn't reached its final chapter yet. Until then, keep questioning, because sometimes the truth can be far stranger than fiction.